Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this follow-up to the UDI Forum for Healthcare Suppliers that we hosted earlier this month. Thank you all for joining us. This session is being recorded, and a link to the recording and Q&A will be shared with the audience by the end of the week. I'm Chris Flory, and I'm joined again today by my GS1 UK colleague, George Lawton, and we are members of the healthcare team supporting manufacturers, suppliers, healthcare providers and solution providers in adopting GS1 standards. Today we bring back the original panelists to answer some of the questions we couldn't get to during the live sessions and some of those submitted since. From the Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust, a DHSC Scan for Safety demonstrator sites, we have Mark Songhurst and Danny Cooper. From the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, we have Andy Crosby and Biode Adisa. From healthcare supplier Smith & Nephew, we have Mark East. From Pagero, we have Anna Mickelwright. And from GS1 Global Office, we have Geraldine Lizal-Bonnet. You can continue to submit questions live using the Q&A function in the Zoom control panel. We've changed the running order, and today we start with questions from Biode Adisa and Andy Crosby from MHRA. We'll follow up with questions for Geraldine from Global Office. Next up are Mark and Danny from Leeds Teaching Hospitals, followed by Mark East from Smith & Nephew. And we close with Anna Mickelwright from Pagero. Steve Graham from Open Pepol sends his apologies as he's unable to join us today. Over to you, George, to ask the first question to Biode and Andy.
George, I think you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone. The first question for Biode and Andy is, will UK and EU requirements be covered by global registration with the FDA and its attendant organisations, for example, GMDN for the GUDID registration?
Okay.
Good ID, sorry.
I think before I answer that question, I think one thing that kind of answers this next question is that when I reviewed the questions that were submitted, it seemed that a lot of the questions are based on the future GB regulatory system, which hasn't really been defined yet. So I can't really give you a definitive answer. But I think what I would like to highlight, even before I go through the questions, is that we will be consulting on our draft proposals for our future GB regulatory system this summer. And I really do encourage you to get involved in the consultation process. When the consultation begins, there will be a link provided on our mhra.gov webpage. So I really encourage you to look at that page from time to time, because we would announce our consultation there.
And so certainly will be, GS1 UK will be sharing that link with our members as well. So look out for that announcement. Thanks, Biode.
Awesome. So in terms of the question regarding harmonization with the FDA, I think one thing I'll start with is that so in the UK, obviously, because we're using the MDR 2002, there are no requirements regarding UDIs at this current stage. But if we look at the US and the EU system, they're broadly aligned with UDI guidance, which has been created by the International Medical Devices Regulators Forum. And so there are many similarities, I think, between the two systems. So most of the UDI issuing entities that have been designated in the US are also designated in Europe. But there are also slight differences between the two systems. So, for example, the US system uses GMDN and the European system uses EMDN. Our current system with the registration system accepts GMDN, but in terms of what will be accepted in the future, this will all be defined in our future regulations, and nomenclature codes will be covered in the consultation process. So if you have any thoughts on that, please do submit those thoughts during the consultation process. So I'll end there for that first question.
Thank you, Biode. So the next two questions are related, so I'll ask them together. So the first one is, when will we be required to add UDI-DI data to the MHRA database? And the second one, is it beneficial from the perspective of market surveillance to start providing Gtin numbers in the MHRA portal during registration?
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of giving a date, unfortunately, I can't give a date because obviously that will be included in the future regulations. And the submission of UDI information will become mandatory if the GB regulations require it. So obviously we don't have that answer yet. And as I said, our current regulations do not include any requirements on UDIs. So although UDI DIs are not currently mandated in the MHRA system, it is extremely useful to the MHRA. As mentioned in the presentations last week, UDI allows for the unambiguous identification of a specific device on the GB market. And the MHRA want to know about the devices that are available on the GB market. And if we're not getting the UDI DI submitted, obviously the information that we have is then not the greatest quality. So UDI DI facilitates the traceability of medical devices, and it will ultimately improve patient safety. So we really do want manufacturers to be submitting this information to us. So my plea to manufacturers that are on this call is, please, if you have assigned UDI DIs to your products, if you are labeling your devices with UDIs, please submit the UDIs to the MHRA registration system.
Thank you, Bayodi. So your next question is, will the MHRA adopt EMDN numbers?
Again, can't give a definitive yes or no answer to this question, but I can state what the current state of play is. So currently with our registration system, manufacturers or the UK responsible person are required to submit the GMDN code and term to the MHRA, and this is a mandatory field at present. In terms of the future system, if we'll continue to capture GMDN or if we'll capture EMDN, I do not have the answer to that question. That's all going to be included in the future regulations. But nomenclature systems will be included in the consultation process. So again, if you have any views on nomenclature codes, if you favor one over the other, please include that in your response to our consultation. Because in Australia and America, they've adopted GMDN, and many other countries in the world have also adopted GMDN. In terms of Europe, they've adopted EMDN. So when manufacturers are submitting information to Udemed, they will be required to submit the EMDN information there. But in terms of what our future system will be re-inquiring, that's to be confirmed. But please do submit your views in our consultation process.
Thank you, Bayodi. And then a final question for you. How are NHS trusts able to access the MHRA device registration system?
Okay, so currently some limited information is published on our public access registration database. So you'll get a link to this database with the set of questions and answers that will be shared with all participants. So yeah, some limited information is submitted there. Unfortunately, the registrations that have been submitted since January the 1st of this year, that information is not included in the PARD system. Again, like with our consultation, we are trying to look for ways to improve the public availability of data that's submitted during registration. So there, we will be also seeking your views on how the MHRA can enhance the information that it publishes on its website. But I would say, like, in terms of like my hopes, I hope that potentially we will be able to have a system that will provide device reference data to a range of different stakeholders, that will be easily accessible and interrogatable by NHS trusts, by patients, by companies. That, I think, is the ambition. But again, we need to hear your views on this during the consultation process, and this will be, then we will build it into our future regulations, which will be coming in July 2023. So I'll stop there, but Andy may also want to add some comments to some of the questions I've answered.
No, I mean, I think you've really hit the nail on the head with all of those, Bodhi. I mean, just to reinforce the point that you've made, if you've got the UDIs, please consider submitting them to MHRA, even though it's not mandatory yet, because that's going to be really useful. And it's going to also help in underpinning the development of the NHS Digital Medical Device Information System, whereas BODI says we're likely to be providing reference data to them. So sometime soon you'll have to submit them if the regs say that in the end, but for now it's mandatory. That's all from me for now, George.
Thank you very much, Andy and BOD, for very comprehensive responses. So we'll move over to Geraldine now. So Geraldine, your first question. You mentioned that serialization is not mandatory in the UDI regulation. Do you know if it is recommended at all or discouraged to have a serial number included in the 2D data matrix?
So it's not mandatory for certain type of devices. It's mandatory for implantable devices, for example, you have to use it. And it's recommended if you have to ensure that one specific device is linked to one specific use or one specific patient. So even if it's not, in cases where it's not regulated and not mandatory, it's sometimes recommended for patient safety. So use your common sense and use the serial number if you feel that there is a need to really ensure that relationship between one patient and one device.
Thank you, Geraldine. Your next question, is it mandatory to register with Udemed if you only sell in the UK, including Northern Ireland and not the EU?
So that's a good question. We have to first consider that Northern Ireland, according to the Northern Ireland Protocol, is still part of the EU. So the EU MDR and the IVDR are applicable to Northern Ireland, and so in that case, registration in Udemed is relevant and mandatory. And for the devices which are supplied to Great Britain only, then there is no need today to implement the MDR and the IVDR, because the date of applications of these two regulations are coming after the end of the transition period. So you have to really distinguish the markets. You can't consider that Northern Ireland is following the same regime as Great Britain.
Thank you, Geraldine. Your next question, will Udemed eventually have a certain level of public access around UDI and critical identification information of a medical device or IVD?
So if you go today on Udemed, actually, you have a Udemed website, so be careful, and there is a trial going on because you also have a consultant who have decided to call themselves Udemed. So you really have to make sure you're on the right website. And I'm happy to put the right link to the chat afterwards. But in principle, you have a public access to Udemed. What we don't know is what type of information you will find there. And we know, for example, that healthcare professionals will have a different access than the one which will be the public access. So yes, there will be a public access, and we don't know yet what type of information you will find. And thank you, Chris. I saw you posted the link already.
Thank you, Geraldine. So next question is, when will we hear more about what product types will become governed by Master DI other than eyewear?
So we don't yet have the official requirements for the Master UDI DI to be applied to eyewear products. We are waiting every day. When I open my inbox, I have this moment where, is it in? And no, it's not. But as soon as we will see first what is happening for eyewear product and how it will work, hopefully we will see what is going to happen for other type of product also facing a large volume of records in Udemed. But it's very early stage still.
Thank you. And next question, if products are still MDD compliant up to 2024, do these products need to be registered in Udemed, or is registration only required when products are MDR compliant?
So you have specific provisions for devices which are covered by the Medical Device Directive and will still remain on the market while the Medical Device Regulation will enter into force. And you have a specific guidance document which has been updated by the Commission, I think in February this year. And again, the link will be displayed because it's not always super, thank you, Chris. It's not always easy to find your way on the Commission website. So in this document, you will see that actually these devices must be registered in Udemed. In any cases, they will not have a basic UDI. So either the manufacturer assign a basic UDI or Udemed is going to generate one. And then you have, in some cases, a Gtin or UDI, sorry, for these devices, and then you register it, or you will have also to assign a Gtin for these devices.
Thank you, Geraldine. That was your final question. So,
George,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Quickly before we move on to the next panelist, got a follow-up question for Bodhi and Andy. I'm not sure you'll be able to answer this question, perhaps, but what is the likelihood of an extension to the July 2023 deadline for UK CA mark?
So I think, yeah, the answer to that question is very easy, which is we have no idea. So it's entirely going to be dependent upon the legislative process. The current intention is that the June or July, whenever it is, 2023 deadline will be that point. But I have no crystal ball. And looking at, on the basis of a couple of years ago, we were anticipating implementing the European regulations before Brexit, and then the delay because of COVID looked in. It would be completely wrong of me to try and give you any kind of definitive answer on that. But from now, you should assume the 2023 deadline is going to apply.
One more question for Bodhi. There are currently no requirements for UDI registration in the UK, non-mandatory. Do we have to register the UDI if we're selling class 1 medical device in the EU?
I think it is still non-mandatory. You don't need to submit the UDI to us. But even though it's not mandatory, if you do have it, please provide it to us because it is useful to us. So if you do have that information, we would be grateful if you could submit it to us, but it's not a mandatory field.
Thank you very much, Bodhi, Andy, Geraldine. If we want to move on, George.
Okay, so questions to Mark and Danny now. So first question is, are clinicians responsible for specifying product?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and at Leeds, yes, they are. So they do work with the procurement teams on deciding which products are available. Leeds is a very large acute centre with lots of specialties that we provide. We are the largest provider of specialist services in England, and at that point, we have to have the clinicians saying, these are the products that work, because we are quite often the end stop for patients. So they are heavily involved in choosing the products that go in. That said, anybody that's working with a clinician needs to also go through procurement so that we are aware of that contact going on as an organisation, and we don't suddenly find a clinician that's decided, well, I really like this product and we can have it, and actually then you get procurement saying, well, actually, no, you can't. So yes, they are involved, but then please do always remember your route into the NHS is through procurement, not with a direct clinical contact.
That's great, thank you, Mark. Your next question to Mark and Danny is, how reliable are the barcodes on products for scanning, and is there a way to manually input the code if it will not scan the barcode?
So yeah, so lots of systems we can override manually and we can type in. So one of the things that I'd really highlight to people is actually using the GS1 standards, because it tells you all the information that needs to be there, the white space, the background, all that is actually in the guidance, and that really helps us. And just this morning, I've come from an operating theatre where one of our nurses was very upset that the guidance we give is to scan the barcode that has the 01 identifier underneath it. The barcode that works on the packaging is actually just an unmarked 2D data matrix. And actually we got a very irate nurse because actually the standards hadn't been followed. So following the standards really does help. So making sure those barcodes are clear, it speeds up the time and decreases the amount of pressure that the nurses and clinical staff feel under when they're scanning the products.
Great, thank you, Mark. And your final question is from somebody who stated that they fully agree with the use and benefits of using a barcode system. However, the scanning of each product takes time, and we have already seen kickback from healthcare staff on this. Would an RFID system not be a better idea?
Yeah, thank you, whoever sent this question in, because it's actually a really interesting question. And Danny and I sat yesterday to actually fully come up with an answer to this. So there are lots of facets to this. In a perfect world, yes, RFID would be better, but it would also require that probably manufacturers would have to start putting those RFID tags on the packaging, because one of the things that we're restricted to in the hospital is adding anything to the packaging by a supplier, because they won't want it back. So if it's consignment stock, we can't add labels to it. So we've got a choice of two then if we've got an RFID system. One is we'd have to buy the packaging and the product, and then it would be at our risk if it went out of date. So consignment agreements would disappear. Or the other option would be that we would have to start wrapping everything in plastic as it came into the hospital for us to apply our own tags. And that's just with the current environmental pressures, wrapping thousands and thousands of items, regardless of how long it would take us to actually do that, just environmentally is not the right way to go. You also then start to think about this on the large scale. One, you add a cost pressure in the system. Even though it's only a few pence, that mounts up over the range of products that we've got for each tag. And then you've got the big challenges. So you've got the challenges that actually we'd need to put an entire RFID infrastructure in for the organization. And RFID only guarantees where the tag is, not necessarily where the product is. And we have got some RFID cabinets, and we do know that whilst the product is in there, or the tag is in there, we know where it is. If the tag somehow comes off, we still think we have that product. We also have the issue that once it's taken out of a cabinet, where does it go? We don't know. So it doesn't solve all of our problems. And there is still an element of time scanning the products over RFID to attribute them to the patient. So if we didn't have a hybrid system whereby you could have barcoding and RFID, you create further problems. So you change one set of delays in the system for another one. And so, yeah, RFID answers some problems, but then creates others. And obviously, the simple answer to this really for the NHS is, if anyone has a spare £4 million, £5 million down the back of the sofa, please send it to Leeds and we'll gladly pilot it for you.
That's great. Thank you, Mark.
It is worth noting that there are projects going on in many NHS trusts to introduce RFID tagging for assets. So that's for the assets that are already within the trust, and that is helping with identifying where those items are.
Were there any additional questions for Mark and Danny, Chris?
Not sure whether it seems to be for you, but let's ask anyway. Oh, looks like it's already been answered by somebody else. That's fine, it's gone. No, that's no.
Okay, great.
There's one, sorry, George, interrupt. There is one that Andy would like to answer before we move on. There seem to be a few glitches when registering on MHRA portal. Can multiple devices be uploaded to one GMDN?
Yeah, I think someone's already done that in the text as well. You can upload multiple Gtins to under a single GMDN to our system. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Great. Who's next, George?
So Mark from Smith & Nephew, question for you. As a small to medium enterprise that doesn't have the... Oh, can you hear us okay, Mark? Yeah, As a small
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Yeah.
That's great. Sorry, you paused for a second, so I wondered if there was an issue. As a small to medium enterprise that doesn't have the same resources available to global organisations, what advice would you give to them when getting started?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And on the last presentation a week or so ago, I painted this picture that Smith and Nephew, whilst we invested really heavily, it's where some projects that you've got to taper it down depending on what the budget is available, and obviously dependent on the product itself and what markets it goes into. So what I will say is there's lots of equipment out there. The basic application, the most basic application of applying a UDI is normally a tabletop printer, not dissimilar to what they might use in the NHS for printing the wristbands. Something that generates a 2D barcode using the rules of GS1. Scanning that, some have actual automatic scanning, but that said, you can have other options. You can use an offline scanner, which becomes very helpful in the future for all. So you don't have to have all inline vision systems and bells and whistles and huge bits of equipment. It's very much about generating a barcode with a label and then being able to scan it with an offline scanning device. And some organizations will actually not only supply you with labels, but also supply a verification report. So if you are looking at no investment but short runs, and you can amortize that cost in, then there are organizations out there that will provide you with label stock already printed to meet your needs. So you can go as low or as high as you want. If there is any more information needed, then I'm happy to try and provide that with the links that I've got, but certainly you don't need to invest heavily. Yeah, hope that answers your question. Thank
you, Mark. That's great. Okay, have you got any additional questions for Mark, Chris?
No, nothing's come in as yet, George.
Yeah. Well, if I could just add to that last question, please use GS1 where needed, because sometimes you have the option for 2D or a GS1 to 8, and so you might already have capability to produce an effective barcode, but I would recommend anybody. And that's not because it's a GS1 conference, it's just that before you spend any money, speak with GS1. They might be able to advise you of a viable option. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That's great. Chris, was there any other questions?
Not for Mark, no.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll move on to Anna. Anna, is Pepol mandatory for industries, and how does it work to be compliant to the Pepol system from an industry point of view?
First of all, I apologise you can't see me today. Unfortunately, my Wi-Fi bandwidth doesn't allow me to share video, so apologies. In answer to the question, the Department of Health initially mandated medical devices and pharmacy with specific timelines for compliance, but they left compliance for the other areas up to specific trusts. So it's a little bit of a grey area, but the answer would be it is specific to all industries, whoever is trading with the NHS. And in terms of what compliance looks like, that's really a case of each supplier picking their own access point and then picking their individual method of control and how they want to connect. And taking up the point from the same question that was asked of Mark, there are lots of options for suppliers dependent on their size. So this is not cost prohibitive. There are free options for smaller suppliers. So everybody can participate effectively. So it's just a case of connecting and picking an access point. And if Steve was here, he would direct you to the Open Pepol website, where you can go on and you can actually see a list of all the accredited access points. So it's as simple as picking one of those and then letting them guide you on that journey.
Thank you, Anna. And your next question is, which industries in the US use Pepol? this particular person was familiar with Pepol's use in the UK and other countries, but living in the US, never seen the use of it there. So can you provide any additional information on that?
Yeah, sure. So Pepol actually isn't used currently in the US, though lots of access points operate EDI in the US. So the Payments Coalition has been working on looking at a pilot. I think the first one that they're looking at is in Virginia. So actually, we should see some Pepol activity fairly quickly. I know some of the hospitals have reached out to Pagero in the US, and they're very keen to explore Pepol. And I think once again, different industries start to try Pepol, it will roll out very quickly, because it does give that ability for anybody to connect very simply. So the answer is, I guess, watch the space in Virginia.
Thank you, Anna. Next question, roughly how many trusts are buying through Pepol at the moment? We're trying to get our business into the community equipment stores run by NHS, and this seems surprisingly to be nowhere in the questions to get into that channel.
Yeah, so there's around 280 NHS organisations that are effectively trading daily through Pepol currently. Some of those are just for invoice at the moment, and some are in the process of moving over to order. In terms of things like community equipment stores and things like that, that really falls into a new area that is just being tailored by some of the trusts to look at community resource. So anybody who is working in the community and wants to look at Pepol, feel free to reach out. Certainly NEP, which is the consortia group that I was talking about in my presentation, they've worked very closely with ourselves in Pagero and GS1 to allocate GLNs to patient addresses and also to community stores. So there's certainly work going on. So I would say get in touch and we can hook you into those pilots and those processes.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Anna. Next question, as suppliers, we are constantly asked to sign up to bespoke portals by hospitals, which includes retrieval of purchase orders and submission of invoices. Will this cease in the near future with the view that the Pepol concept is adopted by hospitals and trusts across the board?
Yes, and that's hopefully one of the benefits of Pepol to suppliers. And in fact, if you pick an access point, that should stop immediately. So certainly I can only speak to the suppliers who are working with Pagero, but we connect to all those other supplemental portals so that the customers that work with us don't have to connect to any of those. In the past, I think probably one of the most frustrating ones for suppliers was the need to connect to TradeShift for the hospitals that sit behind SBS. They have now moved all into Pepol. So again, those kind of portals can completely disappear if you've elected an access point. So I would say for those who are dealing with lots of different portals, pick an access point and pick one even that's free, and all of those different portals disappear.
That's great, thanks, Anna. And your final question is, so I understand all the advantages of the Pepol is a win-win situation, promotes benefits to suppliers and hospitals. However, it is very expensive for a small supplier to afford Pepol. What do you think about the cost of the service providers?
Yeah, I would say that although Pepol is a standard, there are lots of different access point providers and they all have very different service packages and different prices. But there are plenty of us that offer free services for small suppliers. So again, this should not be a service that is, you know, cost prohibitive at all. So I would say get in touch if you're a small supplier. There's lots of really good offerings out there that mean you can link in and get all the benefits without any cost. So, so yeah, I guess have a look on the Open Pepol website. That won't show which ones offer free services, but you can see the names of the ones that would generally operate in the UK. And I know probably a third of those offer free services for the small suppliers. So do get in touch and ring round.
Thanks, Anna. I'm just going to ask Chris if any questions have come up while you've been responding.
There are plenty of questions, but nothing around Pepol at this time. So that's I think that brings us into the questions that we'd highlighted from the previous sessions and those that have been submitted that haven't already been answered. So we do have some more questions, and so I'm just going to put this out there. I'm not going to say who needs to answer it. I'm just going to read it out. So please offer clarification on Udemed and public access, please. Has the Commission not published? Well, it's just being voted up again, so it moved. Where's it gone? Has the Commission not published what level of information will be placed into the public domain as yet? So perhaps Geraldine, you'd like to pick that up? Has Udemed not yet published what level of public access will be available?
I don't think so, and as I said, I don't think it's yet defined, but others may have other information.
And yeah, if anybody has, you can respond in the questions. Okay.
And by the way, because I mean, most of the response we are giving on Udemed are very vague, and I understand it's not really helpful for the audience. But so far, we are all in the dark. The Commission has released a help desk website. So on the help desk website, you have already answered questions, but you have also the possibility to ask questions. I know for a while they were underwater, but it seems that they are issuing tickets now again, so they are able to take on board more questions. So don't hesitate to knock at their door, because if someone knows where Udemed is going, I hope they know, and they can help you more than we can.
Just typing the, just entering the help desk webpage address into the chat. Thank you, Geraldine. Okay, okay, this is quite an interesting one. For distributors of a device who supply into the NHS, does the distributor need to assign a UDI or use a UDI assigned by the manufacturer? I assume that when the UDI is scanned by the NHS, then the manufacturer will show up as a supplier, when in reality, it is a distributor. I'm happy to answer that question. It is absolutely right. The manufacturer is responsible for allocating the UDI, or as what we call the UDI DI, the Gtin, if you're using GS1 standards. But the distributor, the manufacturer or the distributor must provide information about that product, including the UDI DI, to the NHS organisation in advance of the product going into their supply chain, if it's a new product. So they can put that information into their systems, including the name of the manufacturer, including a global location number to identify the manufacturer and the distributor. So when it's scanned, that Gtin then references all the information about that product, who the distributor is and who the manufacturer is. That's how the system is designed to work. There isn't a central database for all of the products that the NHS can actually access. The information does need to be shared in advance of the product going into the supply chain. One thing to mention, though, is that I said GLNs, global location numbers, for distributors and manufacturers, and the NHS trusts NHS organisations that they supply. We're working towards a situation where all of those GLNs and the data behind them for the manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, and NHS organisations will be entered into the location manager, which is the National GLN Registry, and working with NHS organisations to be able to get a feed straight from that system. So they'll be able to match up those GLNs when the information is supplied to them. Anybody else want to come in on that at all? Perhaps Mark at Leeds, around how the data is used?
Yeah, so all the data that we get and things like the location manager, we're using within our finance systems. We're picking them up, we're sending out using JLNs. All our orders go out with a JLN for the organisation. It goes out with the ship to or location on there as a JLN. And if you are unsure of where to look for JLNs, then actually, if you go back into Location Manager, in there we have all our ship to locations and their opening hours and the telephone contact for them.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, right. Okay, that's okay. Jake, thank you for submitting this again. I hadn't ignored it, but you did pre-submit this, so thank you for asking it again. My company provides packs kits that contain needles and syringes, yet they are sold directly to the end user in the community setting in which no barcode scanning facilities are available. Would that pack kit still need its own UDI DI? Again, I'm happy to answer this question. If you're supplying goods if goods are being supplied into a market where UDI legislation exists, and it's a regulated medical device, then the simple answer is yes. It does need a UDI DI. There are some specifics around whether or not it's being supplied into a healthcare environment or whether it's in the particular environment you're talking about. So that's why I didn't answer it previously, Jake, because there is some wording within the EU medical device regulations around this as to what you still certainly need to issue it with a UDI DI, but whether that actually needs to be in a barcode or not, I'll come back to you on that. Certainly, you'd expect the production information to be on there, but it does depend on the actual scanning environment. So, very good question. Okay, does a wholesaler need to register with Udemed to verify UDI to ensure product integrity? I suppose if the wholesaler is the economic operator, then they would need to have an ACTA registration within Udemed. Geraldine, would you agree with that?
I have to find the unmute, yes.
Okay, great. Short and sweet. Thank you. Just to, so somebody's asking about contact details, email addresses for the panelists. Yes, absolutely. The presentation slides, including everybody's contact details, are already up on our website. So we'll make sure there's a link to that, to all of that, when we share this further collateral around the recording and the Q&A, hopefully later this week. Okay, my company sells products through 4 subsidiaries. Can we have a single Udemed account and assign ACTA roles for each subsidiary, or do we need 4 Udemed accounts? Very interesting question, Oliver. I don't have an answer for you. Is that something you could comment on, Geraldine?
I don't know, to be honest.
Okay. But very interesting question, Oliver.
Yeah. Marco, Andy, do you know?
We'll come back to you on that. Okay, I'm not sure. Interesting question. But I'm not sure how much information you may have on this, but what is the UDI implication of Swiss exit for UK products, as it is not a requirement in the UK?
I was very much hoping that you would skip over this question because I have no idea what the Swiss exit things are. But if people want to contact MHRA over that specific point, we can get you some information, but don't know is the off the cuff answer, unless Beodi knows more than I do.
No, I also don't have an answer to that one, but I think we can definitely get an answer to it. So if you submit the question to the email address that I've shared, we'll definitely get an answer for you. I'll put the email address under that question on the chat.
Thank you. Okay, will the MHRA permit stickers with a UK CA mark, or does a UK CA mark need to be a permanent fixture on the label?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a go at that one. It fundamentally, the answer to that question is going to be along the lines that Beodi's already said in her general observations, that we don't know what the new regulations have said. Clearly, you're going to have a UK CA mark for products which are sold into the GB market. But whether that will be allowed to be stickers, or whether it will be integrated into the whole label, is not yet defined. My general observation is that over-labeling of product labels with an extra sticker is not good practice for a whole host of reasons. Mainly because it would quite often, you know, if the device was wrapped in cellophane, then what you're going to do, are you going to put it on the cellophane, or are you going to take the cellophane off, in which case you're beginning to interfere with the integrity of the product. So over-labeling is poor practice, but until we know what the UK regs say, we're not going to know.
Thanks, Andy. We've got a question come in that Geraldine has put her hand up for. So what is the importance of field 0 in Gtin 13, and do I have to insert the field 0 in Udemed?
Thank you, Chris. So the importance is related to the fact that in the Good ID, so in the US, in the Chinese NMPA database, and in Udemed in the future, the database is in principle accepting UDI in the format of 14 digits. There was some bug in the playground for Udemed, but this is fixed now. So if you don't have 14 digits, it doesn't work. And so how to make your Gtin, which can be less than 14, you have Gtin 12, Gtin 13, how to have this 14 digit size, you just add zeros, but you don't add zeros everywhere in your Gtin. You have to add them starting from the left, so at the very beginning of your number, and you add as many zeros as needed until you reach the 14 digit format, which is required. Udemed is not doing this for you, so you will have to add these zeros yourself when you do your registration to Udemed. I think the Chinese database have a functionality where it's automatically done. If you register any type of, any size or any length of UDI, you will end up with the leading zeros being added. But for Europe, you need to add it themselves, or yourself, sorry.
And that's thanks for that, Geraldine. That's very interesting, and feeds into the development of the system for MHRA. If they could have a system that allows for that zero being automatically added, but certainly, and Andy has his hand up. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, if I could just, that's what I was about to come on to,
right.
just to extend this discussion to the system which MHRA has. When you input a Gtin to our current system, it has two checks on it. First of all, it will check that it's a 14-digit. For a Gtin, it will check that it's a 14-digit number and reject it if it isn't. And secondly, it also automatically runs the check algorithm, the GS1 check algorithm in the background. So basically, for the MHRA system, it has to be a proper Gtin. It doesn't have. It could be a fictitious proper Gtin, but it has to be a proper Gtin. And I think, Beodi, am I correct in thinking we have a similar system for one of the other UDI systems, not to mention any specific names?
Yes, we do. So we've built in some validation for the other UDI issue as well.
Now we can say Hibik, it's not a swear word. Yeah, and just to expand on that question, Eunice, and for the rest of the audience, when you are capturing a GTIN that is less than 14 digits long in a GS1 128 or a GS1 data matrix barcode, because you need to add production information such as expiry date, batch number as well, that field is also a fixed length of 14 digits. So again, you need to use zeros to the left to pad out any GTINs that are less than 14 digits long. Thank you, guys. Just yeah, we've got time for some more. Just to reiterate that all of the collateral, so Q&A, links, etc., recording, will be shared with the audience, hopefully by the end of the week, as long as you haven't any glitches like we did last time. You never noticed the glitches last time. It was all running smoothly like a duck on water, but there were a few legs frantically working in the background, sorting those out. Okay. Right, okay. Okay, this is one for Anna would like to answer live. Are the access point suppliers able to facilitate all types of purchasing, e.g. salary return, consignment stock, as well as straight sale?
Thanks, Chris. And the answer is yes, all of those message types are available in Pepol. But what I would say is there's a lot of logic and magic that the access points can do outside of Pepol before the message enters into the ERP system of the supplier. So some of us have very specialized tailored software to help with things like consignment stock, loan kits, the general nuances of healthcare that aren't always as straightforward, and automate those. So again, I would recommend going to the Pepol, Open Pepol website, looking at some access points and then having a conversation with a few of them just to see what their particular specialisms are around those nuances and what they can do for you, because they all will be something slightly different. But in answer to the question, yes, the Pepol messages support all of those different document types and flavors of sale.
Thank you, Anna. Okay. Okay, thank you for answering my questions. Okay, yeah, can procurement systems accept multiple UDI Gtins per product? For example, if they have two manufacturers suppliers for one product code. Okay, I think the answer here is that shouldn't be happening. If you're using GS1 standards, the same product should never have two different Gtins, because if there are two different Gtins, essentially they're not the same product. Okay, Mark at Leeds has raised his hand.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's actually a really interesting one because we do occasionally end up with products with multiple Gtins. They just where there's maybe an update of product going through. So we've got some from one batch. There's then been an update to the Gtin, and then we have another product on the shelf. And this does cause confusion with some of the older systems, but there are now inventory management solutions out there that can cope with both Gtins, and multiple Gtins for a product. So yes, we are now able to cope with those as those changes come through, which used to cause a problem not only for ourselves but for industry as well.
Thank you. And just going back to that question, Chris, we can go back to that afterwards. I'm conscious we're running out of time. I just want to very quickly answer a question about, where has it gone? Okay, do we as a manufacturer have to provide Gtin, barcode plus GLN and UDI? So will that mean 3 barcodes on one pack? Just to make it, just to clarify that, the UDI DI, if you're using GS1 standards, is represented by the Gtin. So it'll be one barcode capturing the GTIN plus any production information that's required. And the GLN, the global location number, does not appear on the packaging, does not appear on the product at all. That is it's an identifier for organizations and ship to and build to locations. And that is used within systems such as Pepol. So if you're signing up or signed up to a Pepol access point provider, your party identifier within that system, your Pepol ID, will be your global location number. GLNs do not appear on products. So essentially you'll have one barcode capturing the GTIN, which is the UDI DI. Okay, I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes left, so I just want to open it up to the floor. If anybody's got any comments they'd like to make, any closing remarks, then please go ahead. Nothing at all. That's unusual.
I'd just like to thank everyone for coming together, really, and giving certainly myself and Smith and Nephew the opportunity to speak to the wider audience. And I'm sure everybody would agree. You know, there's lots of questions to be asked, but thanks again from GS1 and the team, and especially those people that attended the event.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, as I said, the hour's nearly up, and I'll echo Mark's comments. A big thank you to all that have asked questions beforehand and during today's session, and submitted questions via the SurveyMonkey. I'm sure many people will benefit with the answers from the answers to these questions, and of course, there are some still unanswered, some that perhaps we haven't answered fully, but we will get to them all. And of course, we're very grateful to the panelists for coming back today, taking an hour out of their busy schedules to answer your questions. And I'll just finish with a reminder that a link to the recording and the Q&A hopefully will be with you by the end of the week. Just depends on how complex, how difficult it is to find some of the answers to those questions. Some of them are a little bit tricky, but we'll certainly do our best. We may need to follow up with some of you directly just to get a better understanding of the question, perhaps, and your scenario. So that's me done. Thank you very much, everybody. Panelists, attendees, my colleagues, George and Natasha, that have supported this, and we do plan on having further webinars, educational webinars, to help with further answers to all of these questions. And we do hope that we'll be hosting again with MHRA in the near future around this consultation process. It's now midday. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.